Good morning. It's Wednesday, February the 7th. I'm Russell Quirk from ProperPR, and there's a bit of property news about. So I thought I'd jump in and just give you the highlights and the headlines. As ever, I will share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. And as has already been pointed out to me, yes, forgive the tabs that are open. I am busy and I do like to kind of be reminded of what I'm working on, albeit lots and lots of different things at the same time, as you can see from these tabs on the top. Anyway, so the trades, the three main trade publications in the property industry Eye, Estate Agents Today, and The Negotiator. Others are available, of course, the likes of Estates Gazette and Property Week. But today I'm just going to focus on the highlights and the headlines from what I call the kind of big three, really, from an estate agency point of view specifically, rather than all of the other stuff that certainly applies within property around construction and HMOs and build to rent and so on. But I think most of the audience on here are kind of estate agency, conveyancing and mortgage broker and lender led. So fast growing estate agency completes major acquisition. This is Lomond, who are inarguably, really, probably the biggest acquirer of estate agency businesses. They've acquired something like 50 different businesses in the last 3 years. They have just announced yet another deal where they have bought the rental portfolio of Rendell and Rittner, sales and lettings, actually. So another big deal for them. And actually hot on the heels of that, yet another one, literally right underneath the property industry eye. This is My Property Box, which is a 12-year-old business that has bought Brooklands lettings, all for undisclosed sums, which is not surprising, really. Bit of a shame that we can't see the amounts, but in any case, also, this is going to start getting interesting. I've made a few comments in the past about On the Market and how I think, despite the fact that they have now been purchased, they are in pole position to do interesting things where Rightmove's concerned, because they're going to have budget. The rumor is that there's going to be about 40 million quid thrown at them over the next 12 months with regard to specifically marketing. That obviously will enable them to have a war chest to compete with Rightmove in terms of getting consumer eyeballs. I have also said, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, so I think Jason Tebb's done a good job of steadying the ship On the Market, but I don't think that acceleration of growth will come about as a consequence of the existing team. I suspect the existing team will, in the nicest possible way, be replaced by a growth team, effectively. And I think agents are starting to see that. This story here, where yet another agent has dropped Zoopla or decided not to sign up with Zoopla in favour of On the Market instead, alongside Rightmove, of course. Interesting, of course, back in the day, Ian Springett tried to enforce this. You could only be with one other portal if you were a signatory of On the Market. But it looks like the free market here is deciding that actually, perhaps based on the fact that On the Market now have been taken private and have new owners, and they have significant funds behind them, that they might be the better bet. And I guess if you're an agent and what you want is more eyeballs to your stock, well, then why wouldn't you back the entity that clearly is going to have lots and lots of money spent on TV, radio, billboard advertising, and so on. Next story, talk about diversification. Most of you, when it comes to diversification, think about going from sales into lettings, or maybe starting a conveyancing referral business or a division that deals with mortgages and life insurance. This guy here, it seems, instead, this agent decided, Anderson Estates, this is in Hull, decided to use his business as a front for a massive drug dealing operation. But look at this here. Wow, this makes even Connell's profits look dwarf-like in comparison. £2.4 million worth of profit every 11 to 13 weeks. Well, I guess no wonder he diversified, because he certainly wouldn't be making that out of a single lettings branch in Hull. Okay, so that's that. Apart from this last story on Property Industry Eye here, another no shit Sherlock story, which is that it's planning delays are hindering delivery build to rent homes. Yeah, we know that. Actually, it's not just planning, it's and the planning process. It's also the fact that, of course, lots and lots of house builders insist on land banking. So planning, or the lack of planning efficiency in the planning system is really only one reason that stuff isn't delivered, whether it be built to rent or homes for sale. But the other story here is Baroness Penn, who's a housing minister that sits in the House of Lords, in another no shit Sherlock moment, says that the market, the world, the country certainly would benefit from speedier property transactions. Wow, who knew? Who knew? But as ever from politicians, what Baroness Penn tells us is that yes, property transactions could do with being faster and therefore more certain, and that digitization might well help that, but doesn't really give us any solutions. So again, headline grabbing guff from politicians as usual, and preaching the bleeding obvious, frankly. So anyway, that is Property Industry Eye. On Estate Agent Today, yet the same story. Another agent dropped Zoopla from the market. And also here, where are we? Yes, Agency Act launches Material Information Report. This is the homeowner's passport. This is another push into being able to facilitate the new regulations from trading standards with regard to the latest parts being mandated from trading standards with regards to upfront information that estate agents must collect. So that is all very interesting and very good. Let's just hope the sector adopt that, because that's the biggest problem, of course, in our sector. We seem to be a little bit Luddite-like when it comes to adopting new processes and indeed new technology. But I would argue, and actually there's a story here, a business called Home Sale Pack that basically going to do all the work for you as agents. You know, they will put technology in place that finds all of the upfront information on each listing as it's listed, rather than waiting for a buyer, and ensures also that the information is correct, in place and bona fide, so that when it comes to not just upfront buyer information, but also the conveyancer getting hold of the transaction as soon as the offer is accepted, they can get on with things rather than waiting for an inordinate amount of things to land on their desks one after the other, which of course leads us to where we are 5-6 months later in terms of SSTCs turning into exchanges. So Home Sale Pack doing very, very good work here. And again, I only hope that the industry takes note and adopts it, because rather than it being a pain in the arse, which is what an agent said to me the other day, it actually, can you imagine, if you can get deals through twice as fast and your fall through rate halves, that means more checks in your bank quicker, surely. Okay, so that's that. And again, same old stories really here as on the other platforms with regard to on the market being favoured over Zoopla, Lomond buying its 50th business, a good buy to Quasi Kwarteng. Most of you probably won't lament that, and so on. So that's about it. Oh, except for one thing. Except for one thing, you didn't think I was going to leave without talking about the latest house price numbers, I hope. And here they are this morning, 7 o'clock. The Halifax, which I think is pretty respected in terms of its status as a mortgage lender, and therefore the data and the statistics that it collects around house prices based on deals that have only just been done literally in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Normally, you know, most people respect the Halifax like they do the Nationwide or ONS and others in terms of their statistical analysis, their benchmarking of where house prices are at any given point in time. And look, lo and behold, wow, Halifax House Price Index, month on month, for the month of January, so in terms of January versus December, house prices up 1.3%. That's month on month, not yearly, that's the month. That's one of the biggest increases in house prices in a month that certainly we've seen in January for a long, long time. This also speaks to what I've talked about before, which is this huge increase, what I'm hearing at the coalface of the estate agency, which is reports of up to 20% more sales being done in January 2024 versus January 2023. Pipelines increasing, more buyers registering, more viewings, loads more activity throughout the market. At the bottom, first-time buyer, and even in prime and super prime London. So this rather kind of demonstrates that the consequence, no kidding, of that extra buoyancy, that extra demand, is, lo and behold, house prices going up. Year on year, look. Year on year, in the last 12 months, the Halifax says house prices are up 2.5%. Now, you can probably hear there's a kind of a sprinkling of kind of water or something in the background here. I think it might be the tears of the housing market doom mongers that since 2014 or 15 have constantly told us that house prices are going to not just drop, but crash. They're going to plummet. There's going to be a housing market Armageddon. And I've been saying, as many of you know, that despite Brexit, despite the pandemic, despite all sorts of economic headwinds, yes, quasi-Kwarteng, as we've just referenced, despite all of that, the housing market and its buyers, they're simply too resilient. The fundamentals are too strong, particularly in terms of lack of supply versus demand, relatively low interest rates. Now, I know they're higher, but they're not high. They're still relatively low in historical terms. All of the first-time buyer stuff that's thrown at them in terms of no stamp duty, Help to Buy, Bank of Mum and Dad, and so on and so on. Yes, transactions over the last 12 months have dropped by about 25% as people have sat on the fence. What we have not seen, what we are not going to see, is a housing market crash. According to this, house prices year on year haven't even dropped despite what's happening in the world, geopolitics, wars, interest rates, inflation, and so on. So, look, let's just say some of these housing market doom mongers, these grim reapers, are frankly making themselves look proper Charlies, aren't they? And that's why behind me here, over my shoulder, I've got a cutout of Mr. Bean, because I think housepricecrash.com, and yes, I am going to mention his name, Charlie Lamdin and Alex Groundwater, all of these so-called experts that have tried to convince their flock, their audience, that you should wait, that you shouldn't buy a home, because if you do, and the housing market drops by 35% over whatever elongated period of time they are now referencing as their timeline. It was a couple of years. Now I think it's, by 2037, house prices might drop by 35%. That's kind of the narrative as the goalposts move and move and move. Let me tell you something. If you had waited in 2016 because of the doom-mongers' advice that house prices were going to drop, stroke crash, if you had waited, as many have, you would now be, based on what house prices are today versus 2016, you would now be and are £75,000 worse off because you waited based on flawed, mumbo-jumbo, crackpot advice. Today, you will hear the pencils scurrying, the spreadsheets being opened as the likes of Charlie Lamdin and Alex Groundwater desperately try to reinterpret the Halifax data to say, well, actually, if you take out the houses with blue front doors, and if you take out the houses that were sold on a Tuesday, and if the moon is in Uranus, etc., then actually we can somehow twist and manipulate the figures to show that, in fact, house prices are crashing. It's bollocks. It's rubbish. And actually, Charlie, Alex, I don't normally address you directly, so I don't want to give you the oxygen, frankly. You have got to stop scaring people with your fake prophecies of doom, because you're making yourselves look, as you can see here from the data, you are making yourselves look absolutely idiotic. You are making yourselves look like the clowns that, frankly, in house price prophecy terms, you are. Please stop it. For the sake of us having to listen to this rubbish, for the sake of yourselves not completely disparaging your credibility, whereby no one's going to take you seriously on anything that you say or do in the future, but actually think of all the people that you're giving ridiculous, flawed advice to. It's not on. It's really, really not on, guys. Okay, with a big smile and with Mr. Bean over my shoulder here, which rather kind of, I think, summarizes my view on house market doom mongers and grim reapers. They're all Mr. Beans. That's it from me until next time. Thanks for indulging me.